Hey there everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video I'm going to give you my guide to keybindings in World of Warcraft, which is a very big part of becoming, well, just a better player of the game. Uh, it is the 28th of October today, which is the day that Shadowlands would have launched. It has been delayed, obviously, as you know. We don't know until when. I'm hoping they might tell us in the next week or so. So I'm hoping we'll get the news on the launch date at the start of November, because I'm thinking that it's likely that the game will actually release, Shadowlands will release in the first week or two of December now, with the raid probably pushed back to the very start of January. I think that's the most likely thing, but I guess we'll find out. I'm crossing my fingers for that. Over here in real life, I'm in my dressing gown again. We're in another lockdown in Ireland for COVID, so yeah, I ain't getting dressed up properly. just have to deal with it, right? Have to deal with it. But anyway, this is it's downtime for WoW right now. It's a real downtime part. We don't have the pre-patch events, but the pre-patch is here. Lots of people actually making keybinding videos right now. This is the perfect time to get your add-ons working. I'll probably do an add-on guide as well. Get your add-on set up, get your keybinding set up. Just get all of that sort of grunt work done so that when the Shadowlands actually goes live, you're already set up. Everything is already working. You're already comfortable with everything. And you're just good to go and make the best that you can out of the new expansion. So let's talk about keybindings then today. Let's talk about that. This is something that people have commented on my videos a lot, noticing my keybindings, in particular noticing the Q, W, and the E keybindings, which are by default bound to movement abilities, and going, wait, W is move forward for me. How the hell are you moving? What's going on? What's the deal with your keybinds? So I'm going to try to explain that here in today's video. Couple of general rules as we go into keybinding. A couple of general things. Rule number one is you must have every button that you're going to use. Every button you're going to use for combat needs a keybinding. Everything must be keybound. As you can see, if you look at my bars, basically everything is. Okay, my Hearthstone, I have on my action bar, so it's easy to press, and my Flightmaster whistle, my flask and tomes, etc., and some food. That stuff doesn't need a keybinding. That's fine to click it. But everything else needs a keybinding. All of my spells and abilities I'm going to be using in combat, health potions, combat potions, everything needs a keybinding. So that's rule number one, and you should really get used to that. I mean, you can get away probably with a few things not having keybinds, but really aim to have everything be keybound. Rule number two is have a consistent keybinding system for every different spec, so that when you switch specs, you'll be able to be comfortable with that spec very quickly. I'll explain that more when we get into how I actually do my keybindings, right? But just bear that in mind. You're going to be thinking up like general rules. So for example, I always have my interrupt, for example, is going to be on shift and spacebar. And I have that's my interrupt for every single spec in the game. All 36 specs, actually not all 36, all what, 35? Because the healers, except for Resto Shaman, don't have interrupts. But all those, the 31 specs, excuse me, the 31 specs then have interrupt on shift space. Really important to have those consistent rules so you're comfortable. And then rule number three is going to be, well, what is actually physically comfortable for your hand, right? And you want to be putting, the buttons that you're going to be pressing more often need to be in comfortable positions. The buttons that you need to press only every 5 minutes or so, they can be kind of uncomfortable. So let's actually break it down. I've color-coded this keyboard based off of the buttons that I am going to use. So I'll cover this a little bit first. Let me show you the labels. Bing, here are the labels. It might be a little bit difficult to read, hopefully not. But I actually have the default movement stuff is still over here on the arrow keys, right? So if I want to keyboard turn, I can still do it. I can, move around. I can keyboard turn left and right. I can backpedal. I can do those with the arrow keys. So I'm still totally able to do that. However, what I have radically changed is you can see, whereas by default you've got W move forwards, S move backwards, A is turn left, D is turn right, Q is strafe left, E is strafe right. I've basically deleted half of those, and I only have A, S, and D now. A for strafe left, S for move forward, and D for strafe right. So I can strafe right with D, strafe left with A, and move forwards with S. How the hell do I turn? I turn with the mouse, right? So if you hold down your right click, you can then freely move your mouse. So compared to keyboard turning, so like if I want to keyboard turn and I want to get in here, Okay, I want to turn around and leave, turn around. It's very awkward. It's very slow. You know, with my mouse, I can much more easily do it. It's much snappier, no problem. Much smoother, way more control. So that's a much, much better way of doing things. And this is something I advise you guys to certainly get used to. This will definitely take some adjustment if you're not playing like this. But using your mouse to turn is much faster. It's much better. And then you don't need, you can just simply get rid of those turn left and turn right keybinds. And that's going to open up a bunch more space nearby that you can use to keybind abilities, which is really important. Again, I got rid of move backwards, back step, back crawl. I know it's slower. Like moving backwards is slower. Like for example, I can just like strafe left or whatever. I could strafe right and turn my camera. And that's very smooth and very easy for me, no problem. And I can easily do that and basically run backwards faster. But you guys could leave that keybound if you want to. Honestly, I have it on the arrow keys if I ever need it. I've never honestly found the need to use it. I'm perfectly happy not having a move backwards button. Perfectly happy. The movement is really nice with the keybinds I have, and I've never been bothered once I got rid of it. Never been bothered even once, not even one time. Going into our abilities then, this is where stuff obviously starting to get more important. You can see I've sort of marked these areas off, right? So if you put your hands then on your keyboard, right? So I have my ring finger, middle finger, and index finger are resting on A, S, and D. And my thumb is resting on spacebar. My pinky finger then is resting on shift. And that's where my hand naturally goes. And you can even just get a feel for it for yourself in terms of reaching buttons and reaching numbers from that position. Some of them are easy to get to and some of them are hard to get to. And I have flagged up the keyboard to represent that for me, right? This is how it works for me. And I'm going to be assigning abilities to these keys based off of that. So one great example is whereas by default the game has you assign 1 2 3 4, it assigns all these numbers I think to your action bar. Like there's no way you're reaching the 0 button. You're gonna either have to take your hand literally up and move it across the entire keyboard to get there, or you're gonna have to use your right hand. Don't advise doing that at all. Don't even use this half of the keyboard. You can use this for typing, for chat, etc. Or binding things like your character pane, talent pane, or bags over here. We'll come to that in a second. You want to be using all of these buttons only for your actual buttons. And then let me actually cover this bit first. So we want to obviously free up, right? Because I would say C by default is your character pane. I think N is your talents by default. B is your bags. These are really easy buttons for me to press. Like B, for example, is super comfortable for me to press with my thumb. I don't want to use bags with that. That's such a waste. That should be a button I use in combat. So what I do is I have my character pane bound to insert. I have talents bound to home. And then for page up, that opens all my bags. So I've rebound all of those things. And again, you can rebind all of those going to your keybind. I think it's in your interface panel. So I still have escape to open all bags is page up, etc., etc. So I have actually switched some of these around. Okay, like P for spellbook, that's fine. That's nowhere near where I'm going, etc. I don't think this N button should work because I've rebound the N. So that shouldn't happen. But yeah, there you go. So that's sort of what's going on there. So it's very, very easy and convenient for me to reach over, open my character pane, my bags, etc. But that's not something that's getting in the way of my combat buttons. And that frees up these buttons to use for combat. Really, really important. So yeah, these red ones are the core combat buttons. And these orange ones are going to be things that I'm going to use them in combat, but this is a bit further away. It's a bit more of a stretch, a bit more awkward. I'm not going to press these all that often. Okay, I'm not going to press these all that often. So to give you some examples then of what I'm doing, I basically took the MOBA style, right? So I think this came from obviously me. I used to play a lot of League of Legends, and obviously if you guys have been watching my channel for a few years, you know, this channel was originally a Heroes of the Storm channel. And obviously in MOBAs, you've got your 3 core abilities and your ultimate, and those are bound to Q, W, and E, and the ultimate is on your OR button. So that is how I have assigned my keybinds. Essentially, across multiple specs and multiple classes, I do the exact same thing. So I've got Q, W, E, and OR, and these are going to be some of my core rotation. And then I have modifiers going in here as well. You've got Shift, Control, and Alt. You can use as modifiers. I don't use Alt because Alt is very awkward to press. If your hands, I find if my fingers are resting on A, S, and D, roughly, to get to Alt, I have to kind of stick my thumb under my palm, and it's just awkward. So I don't even bother using that, right? I don't even bother using it. I just use Shift, and I use Control. So I'm going to use Q, W, E, and OR for core abilities, and then Shift Q, Shift W, Shift E, and Shift OR for other core abilities as well. And these are going to be where my core rotational things go. So the way I have it done, right, is I put my main filler ability on W. In this case, that's Mind Flay for the Shadow Priest. This is the button I'm going to be spamming, because for me, W is super, super easy to press. I can just be spamming W with my middle finger. It's really, really easy to press, so that's W. That's the most spammable one. For me, Q, I do it with my ring finger. That's a little bit more awkward. So I'm going to put things on Q that I'm going to be pressing often, right? Because it's fairly easy to get to, but I don't want it to be something that I'm going to be spamming like crazy necessarily, because that can be a little bit awkward to get to. So in this case, I have my dots on the Shadow Priest bound to Q and to Shift Q. Shadow Word, Pain, and Vampiric Touch. I stick my AoE filler on Shift W. W for me, Shift W is sort of like the AoE button is how I often look at it. The E button and Shift and E, I bind to these really core and crucial abilities. So Mind Blast, 6-second cooldown, want to use that on cooldown, or Shadow Word Death, again, when they're, an execute ability, but again, you want to use this on cooldown when the target's is in execute. So these are our core abilities, use them on cooldown. And then I use the OR button and the Shift OR, again, going back to that MOBA style. These are the most important things, your big abilities, your big spenders. And so I have them bound to spenders. So in this case, Devour and Plague, I spend my Insanity on that. Or for AoE then, Searing Nightmare. To give you another example, this was from my beta video, one of the beta videos on the Warrior, an Arms Warrior. If we look at the Arms Warrior, we see the same sort of thing. In this case, I actually swapped Slam and Whirlwind here. Whirlwind, you normally wouldn't press that often, but because of this talent Fervor of Battle, it makes it you do a Slam for free whenever you Whirlwind. So I swapped these for this particular talent. But normally I would have Whirlwind on Q. I'm going to press that for AoE, but I'm not going to press it that often, especially rage-starved as you are in the start of expansion gear in the Shadowlands. W would be Slam. This is your spammable rage dump. E is Mortal Strike. This is the most powerful ability for, the warrior that you're going to press on cooldown. And then OR, again, your big flashy ability, that's Execute. So Execute, whenever you can press Execute, you pretty much nearly always want to be pressing Execute. So that's how it goes. And then going for the Shift ones, Shift and Q is Heroic Throw. So again, I'm not pressing that often. Just going to use that to tag up some mobs. Shift and W is Cleave. So this is my, sort of AoE fillery type thing. Shift and E is Skull Splitter. Again, press it on cooldown, does a bit of damage, generates some rage. And Shift and OR is Overpower. So I have that theme going through everything. And then I also have themes for my other buttons as well. So all these other buttons, they also have a theme, right? They also have a theme based off how easy they are to get to. So for example, let's go to G first, right? G is a little bit awkward to get to. It's a little bit tricky. So I put G, again, on all my characters, I put G to be a sort of incapacitate effect. So, for example, this would be it could be blind or sap for rogues, right? This is mind control on my priest. I played Havoc Demon Hunter in 8.3. That was in prison. Okay, so I put that onto G, and then Shift G I actually bind to auto run, which I press all the time. So again, you're not going to press it like, it's not something you need to be spamming, because that'd be it's a small bit of not really a stretch, but it's a little bit awkward. But yeah, Shift G, auto run. I could probably put that to something a bit more out of place, but I just, I'm lazy and I like having auto run because I use it so often, be somewhere that's easy to reach. In terms of movement then, I also use F and Shift F. These are going to be my movement abilities. So in this case, Power Word Shield. This is a movement ability because of a talent, Body and Soul. Gives you 40% move speed when you do Power Word Shield. So F is going to be a movement ability. And then Shift and F is another movement ability. In this case, I have Levitate here for the Priest. If we look at the Warrior, what do we have going on? On F, I have Charge. On Shift F, I have Heroic Leap. Okay? Pretty straightforward. For G, there's actually Hamstring, because they don't really have like an incapacitate type thing. So I stuck Hamstring over there on G, and Shift G still auto run. Other things that I'm going to keybind. Space. Spacebar is jump. Shift space is always my interrupt. I mentioned that already. Control in space then is going to be some form of CC. In this case, it's Psychic Scream. If we jump over to the warrior, shift in space is pummel. That's their interrupt. And control space is intimidating shout. Again, it's exactly the same thing really as Psychic Scream. It's Psychic Scream. It's an AoE fear. One thing I do, which varies actually for the different specs and the different classes, is control and or. I don't use the control modifier as much. It's a little bit more awkward to get to compared to shift. I always prioritize shift. I use shift for every single one of these buttons. I only use control for a select few. I came up with the control and or hotkey just because that's convenient to get to. Not convenient, but it kind of ties into the... Because I'm using or for my most powerful abilities, I just figured, control and or, it's maybe a little bit awkward to do that keybind. But again, this is a big, powerful ability. I'm not going to be pressing it that often, but it's going to have a big impact. For priest, that's psychic horror, so it's a 4-second stun. You can see for the warrior, I actually put shattering throw there, which is a 3-minute cooldown that smashes things like paladin, divine shields, or mage ice blocks, smashes immunities. Not going to press it that often, but it's going to feel powerful. It's going to feel powerful. Okay. Another couple of things, again, going with the themes, always having themes for these buttons, always having themes. I have self-healing on B and Shift B. So B for Priest is Shadow Mend. Shift B is Vampiric Embrace. This is the cooldown that makes me do healing. On the Warrior, B and Shift B. This is a fun one, actually, because I actually am going to switch these around. You can see on the beta, I was playing with Victory Rush on B and Ignore Pain on Shift and B. And that was fine for Fury. That was fine for Arms Warrior. But because I want to keep these keybinds consistent, what I found was when I went to playing Protection Warrior, Ignore Pain is way more spammy on Protection Warrior. You press that much more often. And what I found was trying to get to Shift and B in the middle of, because it's off of GCD as well for Protection. Ignore Pain is off GCD. I found that was so awkward to weave into the rotation that I would actually be capping on rate. And people actually commented on this in the Protection Warrior bits, that it'd be capping on rage a bit because it was just a bit too awkward. So that's actually a keybind I would change now. I'd actually move Ignore Pain onto B because that's much easier to press. Shift and B is more difficult because it's a modifier. I'd move Victory Rush to that because that's a much more situational thing. So that's just an idea, concept of how you would change those keybinds. V and Shift and V. V is my defensive cooldown button, right? So Spell Reflect, Die by the Sword for Warrior. For Priest, that's Desperate Prayer. And then Dispersion, right? So Desperate Prayer V, easier to press. That's a much more, it's the less important defensive, the faster defensive to get to. Shift and V, I usually give to the big defensive cooldowns. The ones like, for example, Dispersion, it stops you doing any other action, right? It locks you out. So it's a button that might be a little bit awkward to get to with the Shift modifier, but it's not too bad. And then for major cooldowns, those go onto damage cooldowns, go onto C and Shift and C. So that's Void Eruption for Priest. This is important because this becomes Void Bolt, which is like every third spell you cast in your Void form for those like 15 seconds or so should be a Void Bolt, which is why it's important to have this on C so it's easy to press. Same idea as with the Ignore Pain thing. And Shift and C then is your other major cooldown. Again, it's quite comfortable to press that. But that's going to be something with a longer cooldown. In this case, it's Mindbender because I've got it talented. But if I didn't have Mindbender, you could see it would be Voidling, Shadow Fiend, as it is without the glyph, which is a 3-minute cooldown. So it's something I'm not going to press that often, but it's important. And for the Warrior, we have the same thing. Colossus smashes on C, and Bladestormer, in this case, Ravager, is on Shift and C. Okay? Pretty straightforward, pretty cool. And there you go. Like, they are the core. One more button, actually, which is T. Haha, don't forget about T. So I've got 3 things actually bound to T, and this is a bit more of a wacky one, a bit more of a weird one. So T, I have Dispels and Taunts typically go onto that. So here I've got Purify Disease is on T. Greater Fade or Fade is on Shift and T for the Priest. And then one weird one. This is a bit more niche, which is Control and T, which is my Cancel Aura macro. So this is much more niche. This is more advanced. But essentially, Cancel Aura. You can make a macro, just slash Cancel Aura and then space and then the name of the buff you want to get rid of. But this essentially removes buffs from you. I can show you this in like a few seconds when Dispersion comes back. But as you can see, I have a Cancel Aura for Dispersion in there. And I just press this button to remove it. Or with Levitate. So same thing. If I jump off of, let me fly up here and just show you this. So if I if I like dismount, there we go. If I start levitating down, I can press Control T to cancel, and I can press Shift F then to replace it, right? So levitating, I can press Control T to cancel that levitate. Just get rid of it. Slow fall, just get rid of it. This is very important for, you know, getting good DPS out as a Shadow Priest, for example. So let's say there's, you know, boss is going to explode in 3, 2, 1, dispersion, cancel aura out, right? So I block the big explosion with the dispersion, and then I use my cancel aura hotkey to get rid of it. I remove dispersion because, well, this gives me 6 seconds of 75% damage reduction, but I can't cast spells. Well, if I only want to immune this, boom, the explosion, 1 hit, I immune that. It only takes like half a second, then just get rid of dispersion. I don't need that damage reduction for the other 5.5 seconds. I only want it for that half a second, so cancel out. There's also a bunch of healing stuff in here. This is specifically for Mythic Raden. You don't need to worry about that too much. Basically, Mythic Raden will put a debuff on you, where if you reach max health, you would die. So we had a Holy Priest, so I've got like remove Echo of Light, or like remove Atonement, remove that sort of healing stuff. But yeah, you can customize this the way you want it to. You know, removing Ice Block, another great one. Whatever, stuff that prevents you from taking action, that's something that could be worth removing. Oops, Shift and G, get rid of that. But yeah, that's sort of the idea of the cancel aura macro. So that's a bit more advanced. But yeah, as you can see for the warrior, again, we're going into like taunts and stuff like that. I've got, I think this is actually an AoE slow, piercing cry or something like that. And I've got taunt on Shift and T. And yeah, so that's kind of how that's set up. I don't, as you can see, there's no actual cancel aura macro set up on the beta because, you know, we're not playing that hardcore on the beta, so it doesn't really matter. So that's a bit of a wackier one. And yeah, there you are. I put up this little thing. Again, you guys can pause the video and take a look at this if you like. These are my specific keybinds. Again, so going through them, and there's a couple of extra bits here just to go through. Q and Shift Q, semi-often used ability. Shift W, it's going to be filler abilities. E and Shift is going to be very important things. And then OR is going to be your most important thing. Control OR is going to be another important big ability. Psychic Horror, Shattering Throw, whatever. The big pistol finishing move for Outlaw Rogue, for example, I put on Control and OR. C and Shift C are going to be big DPS cooldowns. Shift Space, Control Space, interrupts and some form of CC. B, Shift B, self-healing. Control B actually is what I use for Essence and Covenant ability. This came up simply because I had my keybinds set up, right? Then Essences came out and I was going, where do I put an Essence? What's the most comfortable thing? And I found Control and B was comfortable. And then, therefore, that's what I'm going to use for Covenant abilities, right? Because when Shadowlands comes out, we're going to lose the Essences, the Essence Major. We're going to gain Covenant abilities. Stick in the Covenant ability on Control B. Yeah, then V, Shift V, defensives. F, Shift F is movement abilities. Oh yeah, Control F I use for res. I might actually remove that. That's not important. You could really click that. That doesn't need to be keybound. You're not casting res in combat. So I might actually switch that one myself. G and Shift G, this sort of incapacitates, auto run. You actually do use auto run in combat. T, Shift T, Control T, cancel aura. Oh, I have my mounts then on Z. So Z for Sky Golem for picking herbs. Shift Z is what I use most often. That summons a random mount, random favorite. And Control Z is to bring up my Yak for vendor and stuff. Again, you don't technically need all of these hotkeyed. You don't need these hotkeys. You could just use whichever. You could use one of these for whichever mount you're doing, and you could bind something else to these other things. But I wasn't too strapped for keybindings here on Shadow Priest. I think on Holy Priest and on Resto Shaman, keybindings is more rough because they have so many abilities. Most other specs are fine with these though. Yeah, there you are. One thing I've actually also set up, again, this is much more advanced. I have X. X is awkward to get to. Right, so is Z. That's why Z is on mounts. That's not a core ability. It's awkward to get to. That's something you're going to press with your thumb, and it's just kind of under your palm. It's in the way. Same with X. So I have that bound to interacting with mouseover. Again, this is a more advanced thing. But I have a macro, it's called mouse. I'm so creative, but mouse. So /focus mouseover. So this is something we used in a lot of mythic fights with gateways. So for example, I could do something like, I have this bound to X. Wrong button. There you go. So she should be my focus now. There she is. She's up there as the focus. So you can use X to focus a gateway, right? I can set these as my focus. And then I have Shift and X set to interact with mouseover. You can find that keybinding in here somewhere. Is it targeting? I think it's probably targeting. Yeah, there it is. Shift X, interact with mouseover in the targeting keybinds. So this will let you interact with them. So if in this case I could mark the vendor, right, and then I could Shift X on his pane here, and there you go. It's going to interact with him. So typically speaking, use this for Warlock gateways is a great example. So in a Mythic raid, if you need to take a gateway really quickly, it can be very, very awkward to, you know, if you've got 20 people all converging on a gateway and trying to click it, nightmare, right? That can be a nightmare situation. How do you actually click the gateway with your mouse and not click the players? And nightmare. So what you can do actually early is you can mark them as the you can see I'm hitting Z. It's a little bit awkward. That's fine. So I set them as a focus, and then you can use the interact with mouse over on the focus, right? And you can just interact with that person. There's nothing to interact with him, but again, him as an example. Come over here, spam Shift and X, and if he was a gateway, mark the gateway's focus early, spam Shift and X while you're running over to it, and as soon as you get in range of that gateway, you'll activate it and take the gateway. That's like a sneaky little thing. Again, that's more advanced. You don't need to use that. You could use that keybind for something else if you want to. That's more advanced, but that's kind of a cool little keybind trick there as well. Another big thing, I'll show you OPie in a second. I'm just seeing is there anything else to sum up here. Oh yeah, let me sum up these first as well, because these are important. And again, I use these consistently across all of my characters. So 1, Shift 1, 2, Shift 2, 3, Shift 3, blah, blah, blah. So I have these very consistent. So 1 is always like a class buff or something like that. Shift 1 is another sort of class ability. In this case, it's Psyfiend, which is a PvP talent for Shadow Priest. What did I have on the Warrior? For the Warrior, I had, okay, Battle Shout and Intervene. So those are bound to 1 and Shift 1, okay? For 2 and Shift 2, these are always bound to Health Stone on 2, Healing Potion on Shift 2, right? Use those in nearly every single fight. Oftentimes, use these all the time. Really important that they're keybound. 3 is always my racial now, and Shift and 3 is some other sort of CC ability, in this case, Shackle Undead. I'm not sure if I was using these as much on the beta. Yeah, you see, I do actually. Perfect example, actually. Blood Fury, this is the racial for the Orcs, and Berserker Rage, so the breakout of Rage. So more situational sort of stuff. 4 and Shift 4 then are typically big utility spells. Rallying Cry on 4, and then I think that's Challenging Shout. That's an AoE taunt on Shift and 4. For my Priest, I have Mass Dispel on 4, right? Mass Dispel's on 4, and Leap of Faith is on Shift and 4. And then 5 and Shift 5. Shift 5, you can see, actually has Mind Vision on it right now. A little bit stuck for space on this action bar. I might have to change that around a little bit. But 5 is always my combat potion. Shift and 5 is like a secondary combat potion. That's more for healers, where I'll have like a damage potion and then the or like I'll have like an intellect potion on 5 and then the mana back potion on Shift and 5 for a healer, for example. That's often something I'll do. But yeah, and then I've actually added in 6 and Shift and 6. And see, 6 right now is my cloak. This is sort of like a dead slot. And Shift and 6 is an invisibility potion. I'm thinking I'll put like a move speed potion on 6 and invisibility potion on Shift and 6. Very, very, very rarely used. But when you do want to use them, it's at least good to have that sort of consistent keybind across multiple characters, and it's easy to get to. So that's how I set up that stuff. And again, that's the same on every single character. That's always, always the same. OPie, let's finish talking about OPie then. This is one of the coolest little things you can do. I only use it for one thing, which is target markers, right? I use this because I raid lead, and it's just very effective, very fast. So I can bring up these target markers. So I have N. This is normally your talent pane. I have this bound to target markers, so I can like target this person, mark them as a skull, right? This person is going to be cross. All right, and then I want this guy to be orange. And I can set up these markers really fast and, you know, just communicate with the raid, you know, especially if you're like, okay, guys, like, whatever, we're fighting these vendors right now. Well, this guy, kill skull first, guys. Kill skull first, then go to cross second, okay? Skull. Everyone on the skull marker. That's really effective. And then I have Shift N is set to the world markers. This is the OPie add-on, and you can see that they correspond to the same thing. Now, I can't put them down because I'm not in a raid, but I can do Shift N. I can put down a skull marker, click, it's on the ground. Maybe I can do it from here now. It doesn't work if you're not in a raid. This is an Exorcist raid tools, which is another add-on which lets you do a similar sort of thing. But this just is super handy. And you can set up custom wheels to do whatever you want here for OPie. Right, so you could modify it. You could put in trade skills, trinkets. You can make your own like special rings as well. Shapeshifts. That's a pretty cool one. Whatever, portals, you know, there's some pretty cool stuff. Demons to summon in, blah, blah, blah. Like you can set up or just customize the wheel however, which way you want it. And that can work out pretty well for you. yeah, it could be pretty nifty. Actually, you know what? I usually use Shift 1. I forgot to mention this earlier. Shift 1 is what I usually use for unused trinkets. I'm very lazy right now. I have it just macroed in because it's a 1.5 minute cooldown. I just macro it in to avoid eruption because I'm lazy. But yeah, unused trinket. You want a button for unused trinket. Usually Shift and 1. Usually Shift and 1. And yeah, that is how I have my keybind set up. That was pretty long, I guess, but hopefully comprehensive. And you guys now have a good idea of how my stuff is set up and my theory for how it's set up. So you can go and apply the same thing, find out what works for you, find out what is comfortable. And again, definitely move these core things. Like, this stuff has no business being over here. This is comfort zone. Red is comfort zone. Get rid of this stuff. Move it away. Move it over here. Get rid of it. You don't want it there. And then free up these buttons for actual combat things. Have everything bound. Be logical. Have the things you need to press often be comfortable. Have the things that you're going to be pressing a little less often be a little less comfortable. Use your modifier keys to get more out of your individual keybinds. And have things be consistent across every character so that I can play my Shadow Priest and then I can jump across to my Warrior and things are going to be just fine and dandy. It's all going to click and make sense. F is my movement abilities. All my movements are bound to F. Major damage cooldowns are on C. Defensives are on V. That stuff's always the same. Some self-healing stuff is on B. Interrupts on Shift Space. That stuff is always the same across every character. No matter what spec I play, I can go in and I can very easily find that button, right? I can find that button and get comfortable with that very, very quickly. So yeah, I think that's the main thing to cover here in this video. Yeah, let me know what you think. Was it helpful? Was it too long? Whatever. Let me know. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.